Fix it up properly. How are you doing? All right. Wendell, the other day I didn't realize you were live. You didn't tell me.
I made you famous?
Yes, you did. I'm not sure in a good way. Well, thank you very much for being here today. I'm going to address in a short while the issue of the no confidence motion. But before I do so, I cannot help but comment on the characteristic duplicitous behavior of this government. It's as though we cannot expect anything better of this government. It's a pattern of behavior that we have seen over their tenure in office. So they made a ton of promises to the people in the pre-election period about decency in government, about fighting corruption, about managing in a manner that will bring benefits to all of our people, about bringing jobs to people and better health care, etc. And all we have seen in the 4 years is neglect or excuses as to why they cannot deliver on any of the promises. And I have in the past outlined the hundreds of promises that they have broken to almost every section of our population, from farmers to cane cutters, to the miners, people in healthcare or public servants, or people in the discipline forces, and young people. They have broken all of their promises to them. So now we see a bunch of excuses again as to why they could not fulfill those issues. And so, too, now on the no confidence motion, we have seen again this behavior, and I cannot help but comment at the very beginning of this press conference on an address from Carl Greenidge, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, just after the Court of Appeal ruling. And this is what he said in the address. He said, the government, from the time of inviting the Speaker in the National Assembly to revisit and address the vote of December 21st and its consequences, was confident that the required threshold of a no confidence vote was 34 votes and not 33 votes. And then in another statement, he said that Parliament will be reconvened. So first of all, we know now that when they changed their minds, that from the time they invited the Speaker to review his decision to rule, which was that the no confidence motion was validly passed, from that time on, they were then confident that 34 was required to pass the motion, the no confidence motion. Prior to that, they thought that it was 33. In fact, on the night of the no confidence motion, every single member of the legislature, pre the vote and post vote, felt that the 33 votes were needed to pass the no confidence motion, and the Speaker felt the same thing, and they agreed to this. So it was on the 30th of December that when they asked for a review, from that moment on, they became confident that it was 34 votes needed. This is an important point because I'll get back to it a little bit later. And secondly, he said they will attend, the Parliament will reconvene. And so you have to take this in the context of what the chief whip on the government side said, that Parliament will reconvene, or the National Assembly will reconvene, and the dual citizens will all attend from their side. So, first of all, Greenidge himself should not really be the acting president of Ghana, should not have been, nor should he hold ministerial portfolio. Because in calling to respect the decision of the court, that is both the High Court and the Court of Appeal, they are selectively doing so. Both courts ruled that dual citizenship is not allowed in our Constitution. Therefore, dual citizens are illegally sitting in Parliament. Now, the courts further ruled that you may need a special arrangement to displace them, but at least morally, if the courts rule and you argue as a government that respects the court ruling, then you should not have dual citizens attend the Parliament, nor should they, and they should all immediately resign as ministers of the government, because they hold the ministerial posts, most of them, by virtue of being members of the National Assembly. And then compounding this, Greenidge even acted as president. So you cannot be convenient in arguing for upholding the ruling of the court and then deal with this matter in such a duplicitous, as I said before, almost with no decency, absolutely no decency, to stand up and and proudly say, our dual citizens would attend the sitting of the Parliament. So, and you're still challenging the validity of the vote of Charan Das as a dual citizen. You may even appeal that to the CCJ, and now arguing that you will continue conducting business and rely on the votes of dual citizens. How duplicitous is this, and lacks decency. It lacks decency in this government. On the other hand, our dual citizens will not attend any sitting of the National Assembly. We have discussed this before, and they will not attend. Now, on the point of whether we will attend any sitting of the National Assembly before the matter has been definitively ruled on at the CCJ, which we expect to happen within the month of April, that we will not attend any sitting of the National Assembly in that period. So I just had to point out about how untrustworthy, how this government lacks decency. At one stage, they didn't want us to abide by the ruling of the Chief Justice when she said that the government could not stay beyond 3 months in office. When she said that a no confidence vote was validly passed, etc. They applied for a stay, they failed to get the stay, yet they decided not to abide by the ruling. Now you've had a ruling in the Court of Appeal, 2-1, and suddenly they want the country and the opposition to respect part of the ruling, but they and proudly saying that that part of the ruling vindicates them even before the matter has been definitively determined at the CCJ that it's business as usual, and then refuse to abide by another part of the ruling. Very, very important for understanding the mindset of this government. They will do anything to hang on to power. Anything, even if it means violating the Constitution, even if it means acting unlawfully, even if it means doing what we see now, these so-called outreaches, etc. So, what do I think about the ruling? And I shall not outline, because most Guyanese are familiar with what took place in the Parliament on the night of the 21st, and they're familiar with the fact that this government sought to get the Speaker to reverse his ruling that the no confidence motion was validly passed, and he refused to do so. And they're familiar with the ruling of the Chief Justice, which is elaborated and in the public domain. So, my own take on the ruling is that I saw the court trying to put itself in the minds of the framer of our constitutions, or the framers of our constitution. And so they had to go back to that period when the bill to put in place Article 106 of the Constitution was taken to the National Assembly, and in the period leading up to the crafting of that bill through constitutional reform. So they must have scoured all the records of the discussions that took place in the lead up to constitutional reform to get to the mindset of the framers of the Constitution. Not a single shred of evidence in that entire period, not a single shred of evidence could be found in all the discussions that took place in the entire constitutional reform process to support the contention that the framers had any other intent in mind apart from what was literally put in our Constitution, that to win a no confidence vote, you needed a majority of all the sitting members of the National Assembly, which is 65, and a majority of 65 is 33. Not a single every piece of evidence could be found to support that content, to support any other or another view that the framers of the Constitution decided or were thinking about this formula, this strange formula that was used, or that they had any other thought apart from the 33. Secondly, the court had then the obligation to come to the night of the vote, the lead up to the vote itself, and the night of the vote. In 2014, President Granger, Moses Nagamotu filed a no confidence motion, Cathy Hughes, almost all the others, I saw Carl Greenwich themselves, have been on record as speaking about 33 can prevail, and that the PPP government at that time was hiding from the no confidence motion because they would win the no confidence motion. There are 33 seats in the National Assembly. We are familiar with that history. But let's come to the night of the vote. So the court had to do one thing, had to say what's in the mind of the legislators themselves. Because you have to look at the legislators to decide what they were thinking on that night. So Guyana is very familiar with the debates in the National Assembly and the arrogance of their debate that 33 is greater than 32 and that they have the numbers to prevail to defeat the no confidence motion because they had 33 and we had 32. We're also familiar with the process of voting, that the voting took place, and then after the speaker declared that the motion was passed, not a single objection was made from the government side. In fact, they held a press conference and accepted that the vote, the no confidence motion, had succeeded. So it meant that every one of the 65 members of the legislature, plus the speaker, felt on that night that 65 votes were needed, or 33 votes were needed to pass the no confidence motion. This was the mindset of the legislators themselves. The legislators, the fact that they changed their minds was for politically because they want to hang on to office and were hanging on to this 34, 31 issue now. That's beyond, that is a political issue. And I'll come to that in a moment. But if a court really wanted to know what happened here, any other interpretation by a court cannot replace the mindset of the legislators and what they felt was necessary. And the court, I believe, that is why we thought it's such a weak argument, the 33, the 34, 31 argument, that we never really, I think, talked about it in a great detail. Because how do you overturn what the legislators felt? By some obscure calculation and call it constitutional mathematics. So that is clear, the mindset of the legislature. The third issue here, hurdle that the court had to cross, is that the Constitution said a majority of all elected members. It did not say an absolute majority or a simple majority. The Constitution says majority. So anytime the courts start putting in concepts of absolute versus simple majority, they're departing from the Constitution. They're rewriting the Constitution. They're rewriting the Constitution and the intent of the framers of the Constitution. But let's, for 1 minute, even although we disagree with that, this concept of absolute and simple, because it's not in the Constitution, let us go for 1 minute and to the ruling of the Chief Justice, because she explained that at great length. She said, and I'm paraphrasing, that for motions of any other business of the Parliament, you need, say you had to pass a bill, you just need a majority of those present on that day. So if 50 persons show up into the Parliament on that day, all you need to pass the bill would be 26 votes. That is what she termed a simple majority. If on a no confidence motion, you need now not a majority of those who are present, but a majority of all 65. And so, assuming the same 50 showed up on the no confidence day, the day of the vote, no confidence vote, and 15 members didn't show up on that day, you needed an absolute number to still get the no confidence vote passed, 33 and above. That is the absolute number was determined in the Constitution. That's the absolute number, 33 and above. So you couldn't pass a no confidence motion with only those sitting in the parliament. So 50 show up, you still had to get 33. It's as simple as that. Even if you depart from the concept of just majority, which is in the Constitution, to this issue. So that is clear. I've seen major departures from what our Constitution prescribes. I've seen in this ruling, I've seen that. I have seen a major departure from the intent of the legislators on that, the framers of the Constitution, and I've seen a major departure from the legislators who were in Parliament on that night. How can you overturn what all of the legislators did and the legislators felt on that night and the ruling of the Speaker? By a simple, obscure calculation that came out of nowhere by an individual, and it would be tantamount to the judiciary rewriting our Constitution and taking over the role of the legislators. That is it. And it has grave implications, not just for Guyana, but for many countries in our region and in the world. Because any no confidence motion that is passed now around the world or in the Caribbean, if this ruling stands, a week, 2 weeks after the passage of the no confidence motion and everyone accepts this, then the government can then go to the courts, find some obscure reason and frivolous reason and find some precedent in another part of the world that is not even applicable to an odd number parliament to then challenge the ruling. And if the courts start doing this, then you would never have any no confidence motion validly passed around the world. And so I'm not even going to go into the numbers themselves, because so much calculation has been done in the public domain to show about the application for even number parliament, how this works. And we have an odd number parliament. You have to have a majority and whole people, not half people. We have 33 versus 33, 2 out of 65. When you add the two together, it gives you 65. 32 and 33. You get 65. Whole people, whole full-bodied 33 members of parliament and full-bodied 32 members of parliament. Together they comprise 65. And even if you're using I'm arguing, if you use fractions, how come you're not using the 0.5 to say that's the majority too? If half is 32.5, then 0.5, and you can use a fraction to determine half people. Then the other half person too gives you the majority, because 33 is greater than 32.5, which is half. Even if you use that, I'm not going to even go through this sort of thing, because I think Guyanese have rightfully been ridiculing this contention right across Guyana. Even APNU people feel that it is the most ridiculous sort of calculation to make. And I believe that too, and I believe further. So we can be the laughing stock of the world, Yeah, I spoke already about the implications for the region, where any government in the future that is subject to a no confidence vote can to prolong their tenure in office, because now one thing they have succeeded in doing, that if the CCJ rules in our favor, they would have succeeded staying in office, hanging on to pillage the resources of Ghana beyond the 3 months that would have been required for them to hold elections and demit office, as the Chief Justice ruled. So they would have succeeded in that. And governments around the world will start doing this to just prolong their tenure in office. They will continue to do this, going on adventures. We will regionalize, internationalize these issues. I would like every government in the region to pay attention to this, because it would have implications for government and opposition across the region, particularly in the Caribbean. And I'm sure that the bar associations across the region will be having a great time examining this issue. So we intend to do that. I believe there was an element of judicial lawmaking here, and therefore we have filed a challenge to the matter at the CCJ, and so tomorrow that matter will be discussed in a case management activity at the CCJ, and then a date will be set for the hearing of the no confidence motion. We expect that will be done before the end of April. So we, as I said before, we do not want to go to Parliament and if the CCJ upholds the no confidence motion, then every activity done by this government after the 21st of March would have been illegal, including the holding of the National Assembly would have been illegal. And we don't want to be complicit in illegalities by the government. Also, I don't see civil society now taking on the government and this call for decency in politics when they arrogantly said that their dual citizen will go to Parliament in flagrant violation of the ruling of the two courts. Now, we also have tomorrow another case management activity for the issue with the GCOM chairman. That issue, we lost it in both courts here in Guyana about the president's unilateral appointment of Mr. Patterson as the chairman of GCOM, contrary to the Constitution and 25 years of practice. And that matter will, again, tomorrow at the CCJ, we'll get a date for that. We have brought in some additional counsels, but Anil Nandalal is still a very important part of the team that will be taking these two matters forward. I've seen things to the contrary, that he's no longer part of the team, but it's all rumors, as you know. He is an important part of that team that will pursue these two matters for us at the CCJ. They will continue. I suspect in this period we will see a frenzy of activities at GCOM that use the respite that they have been given by this decision, this strange decision, to pursue the house-to-house activity. And I want to repeat again, because I've seen a slew of their um, their propagandists, apologists, including one who did that's in the Chronicle every single day, but I saw one of them did an editorial for the MRR Waves, who now speaks about a bloated list as though it's a fact. A fact. You know, it is not a fact because it was not bloated for local government elections. They didn't have a single concern for the local government elections, and that's the same list that will be valid until the 30th of April. So this argument about the bloated list suddenly becoming bloated because they have to they were supposed to go to elections within the 3 months. We see it as part of the plot between the Congress Place and GCOM. And I outlined at the last press conference, where, maybe not the last one, but the one prior to that, about how what we are worried about, because there are some things we look out for. So if they go to house registration, like they did in the 80s and 90s, when elections were rigged and the lists were badly produced and you had number of people on the list who shouldn't be there, that they have already started talking to people about double registration, about getting some foreign people. They've been approaching some foreign people to appear on lists. And by the way, I don't see the media paying any attention to the huge exploitation of the Haitians now. That they are the Haitians here have to pay money to get work permits, and some of them, I gather, getting citizenship by a ministry of citizenship that is totally corrupt, that they're part of this. I don't know if they have approached any of those people to be registered, but we're paying close attention to this. But one thing I can tell you is that a number of people have been given citizenship and are now requesting TIN certificates. It's easy to find out. If you go to GRA, if the media was doing investigative work, they would easily spot this about the numbers who are here, who are working, and who have now gone to seek TIN certificates. And so all of this is coming out of that ministry, but that was an aside. So this so-called bloated list is the one that they're hoping actually through the house-to-house registration to drop names like they did it in the past in PPP strongholds, and also to add fictitious names. But we'll be very vigilant. We're not this is not business as usual from our side too. We'll be very vigilant to any attempt to register people who should not be registered, and to ensure that everyone gets on the list. But we still believe that the timelines, if the CCJ rules in that the no confidence motion is valid, then the timelines would not be November or anything. It will have to be short period thereafter, because the government would have come to the end of running out of excuses. That would be what will happen. We have seen the last several months we've been so caught up with preparation for the elections, because we've been doing our list of candidates and preparing logistics, etc. But I think PR-wise, from the opposition, we have not been speaking enough about what's happening in the country and by this inept government. So one thing we are clear about is that after 4 years of neglect and broken promises, that suddenly there is a flurry of activities. We see a caravan going in to Region 9, a caravan that used almost $100 million of taxpayers' money to go to visit Region 9. And they said it's government outreach to Region 9. They didn't do that for 4 years, but after the no confidence motion, they did that. And then they said, it's not about campaigning, but we have a video of Felix saying to the Amerindian villages where he visited, we've come here for your votes. We have that video, but it's not campaigning. This abuse of state resources has gone on without the same people who were pretty enraged. They expressed outrage about it under the PPP for minor use compared to what is happening now. I remember one trip I made to New York, and that in some of the media houses in Guyana took up the front page of newspapers for maybe a long while. Became the topical issue, one trip, or whether it was about campaign or it was about government business. Here, the same people who were so offended, the decent people about that at that time. Here you have 100 million with a bunch of ministers flying into the interior after a no confidence vote on an outreach, a government outreach, that they said, was not political, yet we have evidence of it. And there's no issue about that. Secondly, we have seen the usual thing, consorts once again for young people. So after the young people of Guyana not just didn't get the jobs promised or the free education or all of the other wonderful promises, in fact many of them lost jobs, etc., and losing jobs and have no hope of getting jobs in the future. Now they're faced with a new consorts, two legitimate. Now the consort has gone to Thanksgiving for the ruling. Never mind, the matter had not been definitively determined. I heard that in May they've already been doling out large sums of money to bring some big artists to Guyana. And you recall the leak email from some time back from the government. They felt that all you need to get young people excited is to bring in a couple of big artists, pump them up, and they'll turn out and vote. Well, I have greater faith in young people now. They fooled them once, a lot of them, young people. And I see them every day, they come here. Every day I see them, they come here. And they tell me they're not going to be fooled again by a consort or something else, or when a vague promise of a house lot, they go and get a little slip that you're going to get a house lot. Never mind, this government has not developed one single house lot since it took office. Contrast that with 100,000 done under the PPP. So, in fact, guess who will be being the beneficiaries of the house lots left by the PPP? So what they're doing, they're repossessing and redistributing. So we now know that 2 ministers have built houses in the last 3 years, fancy houses, and nobody questions that where they got the money from too, like under the PPP, and that's just 2. I know several others, but these 2 have built on public lands and in housing schemes that the PPP developed. They got land allocated to them, house lots that the PPP left in office, but they can't find for ordinary people and all the people who turn up at the square of the revolution. And some of them got more than one house lot. In fact, what I heard is one got 3 house lots to build the houses on in the PPP scheme. So this is what you find. Again, duplicitous behavior. Again, duplicitous behavior. So young people they're not going to be fooled again by the promises. So that's what we have seen happening with activities. So they're in South Georgetown making promises wild to people everywhere across Ghana. Everything they're going to fix now. They are only hoping to get past the no confidence motion or the elections. Because if they've already been established as untrustworthy, never kept their word. The only reason they're panicked now is because they have to face elections. That's the only reason they're so panicked and they're running around like headless chicken everywhere. That brings me to the charade outside of the office of the president yesterday. at the square of the revolution. So normally when we talk about taking government to people, when my period, I'll get the whole cabinet and we'll go to the region, across Guyana, everywhere, and we will go to the school or the bottom houses with the cabinet members, and we listen to people, write it down, try to take a couple of the technical staff along, etc. That was taking government to people. So they're taking government to people. It's just shifting it outside the office of the president, putting in air-conditioned tents. They had to fetch the chairs like these over for Harmon. He couldn't sit on the ordinary chair. We used to sit on the steps in the school, on the stage, everywhere, on the benches in the school, taking government to people. They had to fetch over all the chairs for the ministers, and they had to go in an air-conditioned tent while the people outside. It represents the elitism of this group that was on the grassroots, and people saw that in the 4 years. Total neglect. They got too big, they were busy stealing and mismanaging the country. But yesterday's activity just reflected a mindset. Why do people have to come to you to then go where the ministers are sitting and you bring the public servants there to process their house lots? They should go to the Ministry of Housing. Each ministry should become effective. Why do they have to come to the square of the revolution to talk about police matters? Why not the Commissioner of Police doing this within his office or his compound and people go there? It was all a sham to show that they are working and they are concerned about people already. The amount of money that they spent on putting that together, I believe they could have probably solved many of people's problems, so the smaller ones. And I heard now they're saying, oh, you're going to get the house lot. That was the biggest issue there, water bill, which they have increased water rates. They have increased the water rates. And two, they put VAT on water, they put VAT on electricity, and they say to people, come and tell us about your bills. Your policies have led to the cost of living going up. You put VAT on basic items and food items, etc. And you're coming to the square of revolution. Tell us about your water bill. Tell us about your electricity bill. Do something to fix it. And the house lots now, I heard one minister said, oh, we will do that in 4 months. In 4 months now, but I want to assure all the people who went there that, trust me, under the PPP, you're going to get the house lots. Because you saw what we said. We have done this before. We have developed 8,000 house lots per year. 8,000 per year. This government in 4 years has not done one single new housing scheme or a house lot, new one. Well, except for themselves. And that's even reallocating. But they will be taken care of. You see the flyer that we put out? We already mentioned that. And we have costed it already, how we're going to afford it. That's the way we work. 8 to 10,000 house lots per year. So this is all a gimmick. That's what the no confidence motion prevented us from focusing a lot on the gimmickry in government now to make them feel. The mining lottery was another one. All along the small miners are bawling across Guyana for some help. They changed, they've not done the roads in the hinterland. You've seen the state of the roads. That's important for mining, for the Amerindian communities, for cost of living, for the people in the forestry sector. They've taken away most of the money and used it in the treasury from these agencies to use for themselves and for the extravagance. Under the PPP, you recall, they said those were slush funds. Well, they did audits of them and didn't find a cent missing in GGMC or NFMU or the Forestry Commission or the Housing Fund. They did audits, but they had money there left in these agencies to look after some of these things. They took all of it away. So no housing. They changed the regime for the royalty. So they removed the 2% final tax, not the royalty, the 2% final tax, took it up to 28. We made noise about it. They brought it down back again, but on a sliding scale up to 3.5%. Now you have to pay the gold board to sell your gold. You have to pay a fee. All of these things have been affecting small miners. They have one of their big cronies going to marijuana and buying out all the fuel and smuggling it into the city. And he's doing this legally, a big crony of theirs. And he heads a particular agency too. And you see him prominently in many of these places. That is affecting the miners in the hinterland. It's affecting also cost of living. And now suddenly you have a mining lotto. And we know that ministry and who's been taking all the prime lands in the syndicates that are controlled by some ministers. The ministers and some of the syndicates, we have had tons of allegations about the beneficial friends and family getting the prime lands, and I'm not sure that the prime lands were given out in the lottery, the mining lottery. In fact, I'm hearing from some of the staff that they just did it like this, gave a few people there, but the prime lands have already been allocated, as we know, to some these controlled syndicates where the ministers have some interest, or and friends and family. That again is a cause for corruption. We have also seen Patterson. Soku has been coming after the PPP for corruption. We filed a case with the police against Minister Patterson, where you have the PPC, the Public Procurement Commission of Guyana, bipartisan body, saying that the contract for the Demerara Harbor Bridge, the feasibility study, was illegal. It showed a pattern of corrupt behavior, that MPTAP said that they should retender the project. The minister solicited a bid, an individual, he solicited an application, a proposal from one person, didn't go back out to tender. 20-something persons were part of the earlier tender. He then bypassed the MPTAP and went to the cabinet directly, and the cabinet approved a contract. Now that's illegal according to our Procurement Act. First of all, bypassing MPTAP, and two, the cabinet had no powers under the law to approve contracts. We took that away from our cabinet. They only have a no objection rule. And they approved that contract. He then took that document and then went to the Harbor Bridge and used their funds without the knowledge of the board to award the contract. If this is not behavior that should be charged, well, this is not criminal behavior, nothing is. We filed this before Soku. Why do you think nothing has happened so far? But it's all hush-hush, because not just Patterson, but the members of the cabinet who participated in that illegal approval. You recall they called in almost all the members of the PPP cabinet to ask us, what's your name, where do you live, just to humiliate people. Humiliate. But I haven't seen any member of this cabinet to call in, including the president, to be called in to say what made you approve that contract. You don't have the powers to do so. That's just one. We have seen the same thing with Volta Lawrence. We've seen the same thing with Volta Lawrence. At the airport, we're paying more and getting less. They argued this was a corrupt PPP contract. Now they've decided to pay more and we're getting less. They've adjusted the entire terminal building. When we were supposed to get a new terminal building, now it's a rehab project. We're not seeing this. We hear about the minister hosting something on renewable energy, and they can't provide enough power through GPL. Blackouts all the time, and this will only skyrocket because they have not installed any new capacity. So a miler should have brought in 160 megawatts to be the reserve now, so their current sets would have gone into reserve because they have not added generating capacity to the main system from Puerto Rico all the way to Barbados, then we will have shortages. So we're very much at the edge where the installed capacity is close to peak demand. The moment you have a fault in the system, you will get blackouts. And the second thing is that in the meantime, they have no board for a year and a half. I've dealt with this before. No functioning board. So the minister makes all the decisions. And we know he made decisions in 2 cases where they awarded 2 contracts over $1 billion more than the nearest bid. We believe that those contracts are corrupt. We've already said we will investigate them. I told, both are funded by the Inter-American Development Bank, and I told the president of the IDB we will do that. The $30 billion bond for Gaisuko, not a word. Where is this money? What is it being used for? We heard about the giveaway of the clandestine award of contracts for scrap metal to dismantle the factory. We've heard a lot about the club that they use, money that we borrow for the sugar industry to build a launch for the leadership there. But where is this money? In the no confidence vote, and as I said before, we're so caught up, we have to return to these things because this is what they're doing. There's a large-scale theft of resources, undocumented. So I've spoken already about large contracts being given out in this period, several contracts below 20 million without any tender, the land leases that are issued. Now I've seen a new set of promises. So I heard that they're collaborating with Chevron, and this government is very tight with the oil companies, tight with some of the oil companies, I'd say, particularly the carpetbaggers one, who are looking now to get some help here. And I don't trust them with some of the carpetbagger companies. So we've seen all kinds of activities. We've heard, I'm not saying Chevron is one of those, but Chevron is collaborating with Critchlow Labour College to do a 3-day training, bringing the kids from the area, Sophia and the others. And they said, the government is saying, after the 3 days, we'll guarantee you a job. Now, how could 3 days of training you bring the kids out and guarantee a job in the oil sector? What kind of, if it's not a lie, it would be a job that they would only hang on to for a couple of days, and after the elections, they'll get rid of them. I don't know who is funding this, but that's what they're telling the kids. In fact, I see a post by one of the government officials, a job is guaranteed after 3 days of training. These are kids who come out from different parts of the country. It's unbelievable, the lies that are being told to work people up because of the neglect. So we now have more kids dying in the hospital without explanations of the minister. She's busy campaigning and using the ministry's funds for campaigning now. Women are dying with unexplained reasons. You have drug shortages. You have doctors are up in arms because of how they're treated. I talked to many of them. We have procurement scandals, and this is the government that promised to make healthcare great. And remember the slogan? I always remember that every time I refer to it. Vote APNU AFC to stop infant and maternal mortality. Now we have an increase. That's what's happening in there. So this is, yesterday I met a young man. He had a job from South Georgia, in Durban Backlands. And he said to me, you know what? This government is slow poisoning our country. And I thought about it and I said I'll use this at my press conference. It's true. Since they're there, it's like everything is being drained away from us. We lost 30,000 jobs. They have no plan for the future. They're just making these wild promises. We have bad negotiations, giving away our patrimony in the oil sector. We have a ton of incompetence and the population at large people are feeling this except the others. So that brings me to President Granger. He said he doesn't believe that the uncertainty and what's going on now in Guyana is causing problems in the business community. But you ask everyone in the business community, you ask the people about the importation level or how many staff they have to lay off and stuff like that. They will tell you. But this is the problem with the government again. And secondly, so I've seen, I shouldn't go on too much longer because I think it's clear that we have to return to a lot of these issues to push this government to do what it was elected to do. And don't be fooled by this spurt of activities. It's out of desperation, and none of the promises they make now in desperation would be fulfilled. In fact, they made promises when they were leisurely campaigning, and they refused to fulfill them. In the meantime, they took all the benefits for themselves. Huge 50 to 100% increase in salaries, the medical insurance abroad for ministers after claiming we were getting too much. Large numbers of bureaucracy, drivers, security using sirens, etc. at the ministerial level. A whole range of those things. Their per diem when they go abroad, all skyrocketing, everything. So they've been enjoying life. And as I said before, see it reflected. Some people who could not afford anything, remember, they always ask me about my house and everything else. And the thing is that you have all my records now. You have my Integrity Commission declarations. See if I could afford my house. But why are we asking the same thing who were ministers just 3 years ago, 4 years ago? 2 years, they started building some of these houses 2 years after they took office. How come they're finding money moving from poverty now? Some of them couldn't even pay their bills like they said. And now building these massive houses. Why not ask them? And there are lots of them. If you go around, you will see how many have done that in this government. And you check their tax records. That's why we went to Parliament to have all of our records, tax records, as well as our declarations to the Integrity Commission released to the public. But they refused to do that because people would see they were not paying taxes because they claimed they were not earning pre-2015. Now suddenly, they afford these multi-billion-dollar things. And when the government changes, you will see what more we'll find. It's unbelievable what's going on now. They're staying in office only for one purpose. I mentioned it before, pillaging the country. Thank you.
Right, if you're Prime News. You had mentioned about your members of parliament with dual citizenship not requiring. Have any of them updated you on any process they're involved with to relinquish their foreign citizenship too? And have you asked them to resign, or have you written Parliament to the National Assembly?
Because this could be a moot issue if the CCJ upholds the no confidence motion. There is no Parliament anymore, and they will not attend any sitting of Parliament as dual citizen. There are two members two of the three I've spoken to, and who will relinquish. Gail Teixeira, I mentioned that before, and Odinga Lumumba. They'll both relinquish their foreign citizenship.
What's the position with Samurai?
I have to discuss with him. I have to discuss this matter.
And if you have to go back, even with the CCJ rule, if it doesn't is in your favor, will they relinquish that? Have you even discussed?
Yeah, they are going to relinquish one way or another.
Okay.
They're going to relinquish the citizenship.
But will they resign? Sorry, that's what I was getting at.
No, but the resignation is not necessary.
know.
Yeah, they will not attend Parliament as dual citizens.
King Kiter News. How has the trajectory of your discussions with the international community changed since the Court of Appeals ruling?
Well, obviously, we had, because we were saying March 21st that the government becomes illegal. So that because of this decision, that matter now is moot. Because if it becomes relevant once again, if the CCJ rules upholds the no confidence motion. But that would mean that from March 21st, the government would have still been illegal. So we'll re-engage on that front, but we're still engaging on free and fair elections, because that's still a big concern of ours, regardless of on the no confidence motion is one thing, and about GCOM itself and preparation for elections, that's a separate thing, because the elections have to be free and fair. You know, I saw the president said credible, but credible elections. But it's free and fair elections have to be assured. So we're keeping and we're engaging them about our concerns about GCOM and the role of GCOM in all of this. If it acted in such a partisan manner in this instance, how would it act, say, after the elections, and this chairman disappears for 2 weeks without announcing the results? Just imagine what would happen in Guyana if you have this chairman who the president found fit and proper, 85-year-old Mr. Patterson, rejecting 18 other Guyanese who were suitably qualified, all of them. And, you know, they selected him, and he was fit and proper, and they even made that the slogan, AFC, of their campaign, fit and proper, rubbing Guyanese nose in the dust. Not the PPP, our people, including all the decent people of Guyana who submitted their names, the fit and proper thing. If he disappeared, and we know he's prone to fall sick or to abruptly end meetings, I shouldn't say more about that, abruptly end meetings and disappears. He disappears on the election day when the results are known. And what happens to the country? Chaos. So we have to also fix GCOM. It's not just about no confidence motion, because at some point in time there shall be elections. No confidence motion or not.
Okay.
There shall be elections.
So,
If there's a CCJ ruling in your favor, you mentioned earlier, what is the shortest possible timeline do you propose for that?
I don't want to speculate too far ahead, but we'd argue for the shortest possible time. Yes, exactly. Sure, let me leave it at the shortest possible time at this time. Let us, first of all, make our case there. Once, if we prevail there, I'd host a press conference and you can ask me that question immediately.
Let me bring you back to the Carter Center discussion.
Yes, sure.
Were the suggestions made by them to remove the people living overseas the only thing that you saw necessary to have a list that is?
No, they did not make that suggestion. APNU had been arguing that the list is bloated. So you saw in their statement they put bloated in an inverted comma. APNU has been argued. We have dealt with that argument already. How strange and is there a synonym for duplicitous? Can you help me with this? I'm trying to find a synonym that I can't convey all of this. Right, but again, let me use the duplicitous word again. When the elections were the same list, they love it, etc. So now they're saying bloated. So Carter Center put bloated. They then told, apparently, the people, I don't know, the Carter Center, that the people who are abroad, their names, they shouldn't be on the list, the people who are abroad. So my argument was, one, that you cannot remove people's name from a list if you're simply abroad. Yeah, because what if you go abroad for 2 months, or 3 months, or 5 months for that matter, and you lose your right to vote? because your name would not be on the voters list. So I said, we in the PPP are not interested in working out a deal with APNU. You recall in 1997, we had a deal. APNU and the PNC and PPP agreed that we will use voters' ID for people as identification, as absolutely necessary for people to vote. The same APNU, after they lost the elections, PNC, they then filed a case that the use of ID was unconstitutional. The same APNU, in another duplicitous act, they did that, and the elections were vitiated. We lost 2 years of our term, not because there was a fraudulent election, but because the arrangement we made with PNC was deemed unconstitutional, and we lost 2 years. So we're not interested in making no arrangement like that. That they will then turn around. They will get somebody from abroad to come just before the elections and challenge that. Why did you remove my name? And it's unconstitutional. And secondly, after the elections, when they lose, they will do the same thing.
The president.
And so this is why my position was, and then they said they wanted to use immigration records. So I pointed out about the immigration records. First of all, Felix is in control of this. I don't trust Felix. That's one. And that's period. I don't trust Felix. Period. He on the trustworthy scale, he ranks 0.001. And so that's Felix there for you. 2, the statistics are flawed, because what about people who've left through Suriname or through, say, Latin? And that's 2. 3, so these are very important issues for us. So we then said, if you're worried about people who are voting abroad or who live abroad, let us do a couple of things. Let us prepare a parallel list. People's name remain on the voters list, the OLE. So in every presiding officer will have the official list of electors, every presiding officer, every polling agent, etc. And they would have a list of the immigration records of people who've been abroad for 3 months. So I say, when the person comes in, if you come in now and you're on that list, a bell should go off. They should ring a big bell in the polling station. We have a man who should have been abroad. Let's check him to see if he's real. And then only if he is real, then you allow him to vote. So his name is now removed. So you check him, enhanced scrutiny. You can strip search him, whatever you want to do. Not that I'm suggesting. I shouldn't be suggesting that. But you check enhanced scrutiny, so you don't have to worry about people who are abroad voting. Every presiding officer, every polling agent. And then I had offered President Granger to even let us pay for additional people, plus get the observers in each of the 2,200 polling places. So if the parties have a polling agent each, let us pay for a second polling agent for using state resources for every party. So, and then you have an observer at every polling place. So only people who are eligible to vote can vote. And GCOM themselves have been arguing how robust their system with the presiding officer is. So you would not have people, even if their names on the list and they may be abroad, they wouldn't be able to vote. And that will work well with us, because we don't steal no votes. It's APNU where we have seen unusual patterns in some of the areas that we've been talking about. So that was what the suggestion was. How you address it. Not by removing people's name from the OLE. That would be unconstitutional. Can't remove them just like that. But enhance the safeguards that they don't vote, which makes sense to everyone. If that's what their concern, APNU concern is, that the people will vote, then fine.
When the Jeffrey Channel 2 headline news, the president in waiting, according to you, is Mr. Ali. How is he doing? Any word? What does he think about all that is happening now?
Well, he is, yesterday he was at Monrepo addressing a community meeting after several meetings in here. Today he is in Mahaika. He's on the ground talking to people. And so you've had a chance on the protest day to talk to him. That was a few longer than you've spoken to President Granger, I think. Many of the media met with him. So, and he is just the presidential candidate who had been selected 2 months ago. And they had full access to him on the protest day, on March 22nd. So he is available to the press. He is being on the ground, working very, very hard, meeting real people, listening to them, talking to them. Today in Mahaica, yesterday in Monrepo, he has a full schedule of meeting people where it matters, on the ground.
There's some rumors about your possible prime ministerial candidate. How are you doing with that?
We have outlined, we have agreed to the process through which we select the candidate, and we are waiting to trigger that once we have a date for elections, which could all be triggered in a week. Within 1 week, we can make that selection.
You have a short list, though?
No, we haven't started asking for nominations as yet.
What's the status on your manifesto?
Oh, we're still working very hard on this. I have now, what we did, we had a manifesto of 2015. So we put back those ideas. We inserted all the ideas of the things we want to reverse that this government put in place. We then had a number of people send in written submissions through emails. Some drop off hard copies of the suggestion. The conference we had on the East Bank, that came up with nearly 600 ideas. But when you group them together, you see a lot of overlap and stuff like that. And we invited 100 organizations to come, over 100 organizations to come there. We had about 70 participated or so. And so all of those are being put together. But you cannot continue to learn all the time. Just yesterday I had a discussion with a young guy who wants to start a new business. And he had some great ideas about a new industry that, if we make some slight changes, can generate tens of jobs, thousands of jobs in the future. And then we've had a lot of suggestions about the creative industries and stuff like that too. So we collated all of them. We then look at the template and we took away the duplicating ideas. We've grouped them by sectors now, all of these ideas. And we started the big ones, like the job creation and the housing, like 8,000 to 10,000 house lots a year. We costed that. We costing how many kilometers of roads we have to maintain every year in the hinterland. Over 2,000 kilometers of road. We're working on the numbers to do that. We have actually finished working on the numbers. So every big idea we're costing, and we're trying to put it into a framework, for a budget framework, that we could immediately upon assuming government, revise the current framework into one that focuses on job creation, on housing, on pushing down the cost of living, on greater welfare, crime issues and stuff like that. These are the primary focus, freeing up young people to the society itself. So we have the manifesto work is advancing, and I like the engagement. We have a lot of young people and others, and please feel free to continue submitting your ideas to us.
President Trump has ordered the Russians to remove all the personnel, particularly the military personnel, from Venezuela. And in light of this situation in Guyana, do you make a nexus for persons that are saying in the international front that it has to do with the large find of oil that Guyana has, and they're trying to tie that? What's your take on that?
I think the situation in Venezuela is occupying the attention of the United States of America and many other countries. So I have no doubt that Guyana is important in a geopolitical sense, as are the other countries of the Caribbean and Latin America. And so, but I do not think that the enhanced focus on Venezuela is because of our oil find. that it is related to what's taking place in Venezuela itself. But as I said before, there's always that geopolitical nexus because we're a neighboring country.
The president said that despite the appeal court's ruling, his government would go to Parliament to provide funds for GCOM's readiness. Would there be a seat as such?
We don't believe that they need funds. We have gone through this argument, Article 222 of the Constitution, the statement by the minister himself when the budget for GCOM was passed, 5.3 billion to use as they see fit and they prioritize. They should have that money. To hold elections, you need under 3 billion. So they have now given a budget of an additional 3 billion because they're including house-to-house registration in that. That may not even be necessary. So what happens? Let's play out the scenario here. That they win the no confidence motion issue at the CCJ. Then GCOM then doesn't need more money because you don't go to elections this year. They would argue for elections next year, constitutional due period. So why do they need more money? If we win the no confidence motion at the CCJ, you have to go to early elections. There can be no house-to-house registration. For early elections, you have the money there. It's as simple as that.
So you wouldn't support?
No, because it's unnecessary. It's a logical thing.
Even when house-to-house registration starts, are you going to take steps to have supporters or even hire some independent persons to follow the step to ensure the integrity of the process is intact?
Yeah, definitely. We're a party that has a fairly good grassroots support all across the country. And so we will be looking out for the interests of Guyana there to ensure that we have the process done properly. But that is only if necessary. So all of this is conditional upon what I said earlier.
You said that the Tarijagan Airport project, it's not new, it's a rehab project. And you mentioned that we're only getting a new terminal building. Is that the only issue with that?
No, I said that the original project was to get the runway, a huge apron, so that 8 aircrafts can stand at the same time, including one of the big aircrafts. I don't know too much about aircrafts, but where you have a high bridge, one high bridge that can connect with them. And a new terminal building, an entirely new terminal building. That was what the project was. They said the cost was inflated. Now we're getting the runway, we're probably getting some of the terminal, the apron. We're not getting the 8 air bridges any longer. And instead of pulling down the entire terminal building and building a spanking new one, they have moved it to rehabilitation of the airport now, those old buildings. And so we are paying more and getting less. And they argued that that was one of the corrupt projects of the PPP. You remember that? Really, what now we have has to be investigated.
But is this a matter of the government changing it, or is the contractor made a variation?
But who approves the variation? Contractors can't make any variation without approval of the government. So we believe Patterson's ministry did all of this. And secondly, that even the defects that the consultants have identified, that the defects which are numerous, they're hushing up the defects with that the ministry. I believe there's collusion.
Okay.
Thank you very much.